My project was over Joan of Arc and King Louis IX of France, and essentially the theme for my project was them having an encounter very much similar to King Charles the Eighth's encounter with Joan of Arc, in which she attempted to get him crowned. And so, as for my Meet the Characters portion, I basically went over their achievements with Joan of Arc. I talked about her pivotal role in the Hundred Years' War, and with King Louis, I talked about how while he wasn't a very successful military leader, his personality was well respected and kept him loved by his people. And going into more detail with that, Joan of Arc had many military successes, and after she received her vision and special mission from God, she was able to not only help Charles the Eighth finally receive his coronation and reigns, but she actually was one of the important leaders who allowed France to gain many victories in the Hundred Years' War. Now, with King Louis, he was very well respected by his people, and although he did lead the Seventh and Eighth Crusades, they weren't very successful. But regardless, he was able to establish the Golden Century of St. Louis, in which he maintained stable political and economic relations with other countries, driving innovations in Gothic architecture as well as art. And one of their main similarities between Joan of Arc and King Louis IX is actually the fact that they were canonized as saints. And while Joan of Arc received her canonization on May 16th of 1920 from Pope Benedict XV, King Louis received his on August 11th of 1297 from Pope Boniface of France, and both of these canonizations were rewarded to them as a result of their loyalty and basically just massive amount of faith. You see, they were very devoted Catholics and were very much involved in the act of protecting their religion. Now, as for this picture I chose, I decided that I would like a picture of canonization to represent my project, because during my research I realized that this was the most important, the most interesting concept that was open to me, and basically just the idea that there was a special ceremony where even people who aren't alive anymore were able to be declared as saints. Sounds like a very intriguing ritual to me. I was really fascinated by what I learned about how the Pope would go through it, and several nobility would gather around for the ceremony. And especially since they were added to the Catholic League, I just felt like canonization as a whole is something that, as a practice, is just a completely fascinating and intriguing idea. Now, as for my essay, I actually just used the same comparisons that I mentioned earlier between Joan of Arc and King Louis. I discussed first the similarities in their canonizations and why they were given, why they were regarded as saints, and then I went into their differences. The main differences that I discussed had to do with the fact that Joan of Arc was very efficient militarily wise, and she was able to achieve much in that path, whereas King Louis IX of France was more of a political and economic figure. He maintained stable relations with other countries and allowed France to go through the golden century of St. Louis. Now, regarding my Google map, again, since this is supposed to be a sort of parody of the path that Joan of Arc took in order to not only get King Charles VIII crowned, but also to ensure that the battles that France went through were won, I sort of mimicked this, and essentially I substituted King Charles VIII for King Louis of IX, whom my project focuses upon. And so, if you'll look at the maps, you'll see that their paths actually interact with each other in a way much similar to their original paths. With King Louis going, you'll find that he actually does go to both Cairo and Damietta of Egypt, the same places, mind you, that he used for his 7th and 8th Crusades, because I realized that it'd be kind of an interesting dynamic if both Joan and King Louis were going on these large scale of adventures, and then they finally met in Alhambra to discuss just how life is going. Because so the idea here is that despite the fact that they're living in the same region of Europe, it's during different time periods, so they're able to go on different adventures in different time periods and then meet each other on the same plane of time in Alhambra of France, and then discuss all of their adventures. And I thought that was just a really cool idea, which is why I decided on that. And so the databases that I used to find most of this information was on Britannica, as well as several other encyclopedias and the other databases in allotted to me by the Kerr Library. And here I have a video that just basically goes over Joan of Arc's life. Unfortunately, Discovery Education didn't have any videos for King Louis IX, but I felt that this video for Joan of Arc was just so detailed and extensive that I should include it. And yeah, so essentially when doing this project, the reason I chose Joan of Arc and King Louis were that I saw that they were both very devoted Catholic Christians, and I thought that it'd be nice to be able to compare and contrast the how and why of why their lives turned out the way they did, as well as the similarities between them despite living at least 200 years apart. And so when going back over this project, I feel as though the made up medieval encounter that I was able to create between these two was very appropriate. And so all in all, I believe that's essentially what my project is about.